Welcome back to Hospitality Reinvented. I am your host, Doug Radkey, the founder and principal consultant with KRG Hospitality, an agency that helps new and seasoned bar, restaurant, and boutique hotel operators turn confusion into clarity, pressure into performance, and guesswork into growth. This is episode number 30, and I am doing this from the hotel in Las Vegas where I just finished speaking at this year's bar and restaurant Expo. It's always a great show. It's my 7th time coming back, 5th time as a speaker, and I'm heading back to the show floor after this episode. But the session this year was on the 8 reasons that hospitality businesses fail, and also the 4 key takeaways needed to help reduce that failure rate, which is really a lot of what we talk about here already on the podcast. Each attendee, though, was provided 4 takeaway documents, which were the 40-hour freedom formula, the crisis-proof playbook, the profit protection system, and the legacy blueprint. I was thinking after the session, though, that we will make sure to do a similar session here on the podcast and one episode dedicated to each of those 4 takeaways. So make sure to look out for those in the near future. So what's on the schedule for today? Today, I want to address something that is quietly killing businesses across this industry, and it's likely not something that you think about too often or something that quickly comes to mind, and it actually ties in well with the session that I was just mentioning about. So, it's not inflation. It is not labor shortages. It is not your competition. It is confusion. Specifically, it's the confusion between tactics and strategy. Because too many bar, restaurant, and hotel operators believe they are being strategic, when in reality, they are just being busy. So let me say that very clearly. Busy is not strategic. And that misunderstanding can become very, very expensive. So let's first talk about the illusion of progress. Maybe let me paint a picture here for you. Maybe you're posting daily on social media. You are launching a new feature every single month. You are running different promotions all the time. You're updating your menus when you're supposed to be updating your menus. You're, testing new food options, new cocktails or zero proof, drinks. You're hosting events maybe. You're boosting your ads online. You feel like there is movement everywhere right now. But for some reason, you cannot figure out why revenue and your profit is still inconsistent. You cannot figure out why your margins are still, thin and not hitting the needed level that you need. You cannot figure out why your staff turnover is still so high. What's happening is you feel like you're constantly pushing your business up a hill. That's because tactics, like the ones that I just outlined, are just movement. They are not strategy. Strategy is direction. Posting on social media is a tactic. Launching a feature is a tactic. Running a promo is a tactic. Strategy, though, it answers one critical question. Why are we doing this? And how does it move the business both short term and long term? Without that answer, tactics just become noise. And noise feels productive, but produces very little. Now, here's a story that you've likely seen or maybe heard before. I once worked with an operator who was proud of their marketing calendar. Every week, they had something new. There was, trivia nights and industry nights. There was live DJs and the holiday specials. There was limited time offers and limited time features. And on paper, they looked active. They looked engaged and they looked innovative. But when we reviewed their numbers, something was really, really off. Their margins were still inconsistent. They were still doing under 8% profit margins. Their prime costs were starting to really, kind of drift away from where they were supposed to be. Their guest frequency was actually starting to plateau. Their average check was stagnant. And when I asked them what their strategy was, they said, well, we're trying to, drive traffic with a full event calendar, just like our competitors do. That is not strategy. That drive for more traffic without positioning is just going to become fragile for you and your business. Revenue without margin discipline is temporary, and growth without clarity is dangerous. Remember a few moments ago, I said tactics are movement and strategy is direction, right? So let's focus on this a little bit more. Tactics, they can change weekly. Strategy, though, holds steady. Tactics are kind of like tools, but strategy is the blueprint. Tactics can look impressive. Strategy, though, it looks disciplined. If you change direction every single time that the market, twitches some way or another, you don't have a strategy. What you have is just reaction. And consistently being in reaction mode is a lot more exhausting than being in strategy mode. Strategic operators don't wake up asking, what should we post today? They ask, what are we building this quarter? And then what is the actual social media strategy that aligns with that? And what are the objectives and the KPIs with each post to ensure that it is working? That's a different altitude. That's a different mindset, an entirely different mindset. Now, here's something that I tell clients all the time. Strategy determines where you compete. This is where most operators struggle. Strategy is not about what you sell. It is about where you compete. So ask yourself these, fairly important questions here. So who are you? Where are you going? Why are you doing this? And how will you get there? Or how will I get there? Every detail must align with your identity and your goals and your purpose. Tactics don't do that. Strategy, however, does do that. This is something we highlighted more deeply back, I think it was in episode number 9, I think it was. If you don't answer those questions clearly, the market is going to answer them for you. And let's be honest, the market is ruthless. That is why over 4,000 bars and restaurants are going to close this year in Canada and over 14,000 in the US. The market is ruthless, and you need to be more strategic and not reliant on baseless tactics. If you just rely on tactics and if you don't answer those critical questions towards strategic clarity, you are likely just going to become maybe the cheap option, the noisy option, the trendy, option, the, good enough kind of option. None of those create durability for you and your business. None of these create a legacy business for you. Strategic messaging and positioning, that creates pricing power. Strategic messaging and positioning, that creates loyalty. And strategic messaging and positioning creates clarity for your team. Without strategy, you drift. Whether that's quick, or slow is to be determined, but it will happen. Now, here's something else that I constantly see out there when talking to operators, and even speaking at different conferences. Operators layer tactic on top of tactic on top of tactic. New menu items, new POS or tech integrations that they were sold on, new marketing, pushes, new vendors, just overall new ideas, but no systems. Tactical operators are constantly reacting. Strategic operators design playbooks that outline a very specific strategy. They start to ask questions like, how does this integrate into our systems? How does this align with our brand? Does this support our target, margins that we need to be successful? Can our team execute this, consistently? What's the risk here if we don't take action? When the market shifts, and it always does, tactics are going to fail first. Strategy, though, again, that is what holds everything together. Playbooks, and guess what? They hold. And systems, with that, those systems absorb that volatility. Chaos is usually the result of too many tactics and not enough strategic structure. Now, let's talk about money here. A topic everyone, both loves and hates, for different reasons. It's a topic to bring up, though, because this is where confusion becomes a little bit maybe dangerous. Tactics, they just chase revenue. Strategy, though, it protects wealth. Strategy, it defines margin expectations. Strategy drives your business into that realm of, 15 to 24, 25% profit margins. Strategic financials or financial playbook, that helps you, dictate what your menu price, should produce, what your labor model must support, what your pricing structure, what it must achieve. Tactics can increase sales, yes, temporarily. Don't get me wrong. I totally understand. But if they dilute your margin, you're just, self-defeating, you and your business. You've heard me say this on the podcast before. Revenue is a vanity metric. Profit tells your story. I've seen operators double their marketing spend, and grow their revenue by 10%, but their profits were declining. Why? Because there is no strategic filter in place. So I'm going to say this again. Revenue is vanity. Profits tell your story, and strategy protects your profits. So if that's not an uncomfortable truth for you, this one is likely going to be, for you. Activity feels good, right? It gives you the illusion of control. It fills your day. It keeps your team moving. But as I said at the start, movement without direction is just kind of like motion. And motion does not equal progress. Some operators, avoid strategy because strategy requires stillness. It requires reflection. It requires critical thinking. It requires sometimes, saying no. It requires discipline. It requires buy-in from your entire team. It's easier to stay busy than to confront the bigger questions. But leadership is not about movement. It is about direction as well. And as I said in another earlier episode, leadership is not about force. It is not about intensity. It is about direction, and it is about setting expectations. It is about organizing the chaos so your people can function. A great leader creates simplicity inside of the complexity. A great leader knows the difference between a preference and a priority. A great leader anticipates friction instead of just reacting, to it. A great leader protects momentum and focuses on, you guessed it, strategy over tactics. And if you are ever thinking about scaling your business, let me tell you, scaling requires strategy, just not more tactics. Many operators try to, scale before they are strategic. And then what happens? It's they start to just replicate all of that inconsistency and the margin volatility that's out there that we've talked about. That owner dependency we highlighted a few episodes back as well. That starts to come into play. And your team and guests, they get confused. Expansion without strategic clarity just multiplies your weakness. Scaling is not about adding more, marketing. It's not about louder, branding or anything like that. The mindset shift here is that strategic and strategy is the blueprint. Tactics are just the tools. If your blueprint is flawed, more tools are not going to fix that. So what does all of this look like in practice for you? Well, it looks like fewer initiatives. It's clear priorities. It's defined quarterly objectives. It's margin targets that are really non-negotiable. It's menu or program design aligned with positioning. It is, labor models that are aligned with volume and productivity. It's marketing that is aligned with your identity. When you have all that, your business looks and acts calmer. Your business is no longer, a stagnant business. Your business is more disciplined when you have all of that in place, because when direction is clear, when strategy is present, decisions get easier. And then guess what? Your energy as a leader, that starts to increase. There's a noticeable difference between tactical leaders and strategic leaders. Tactical, leaders, they feel busy and they feel stressed, that they feel reactive and maybe more urgent. Strategic leaders, though, they feel focused and they feel calm. They feel more intentional and more ahead because they have that direction. The external environment may look the same, but internally, within, the four walls of your venue, everything changes because strategy reduces chaos and that high level of clarity begins to just compound. So here is a question that you need to ask yourself as we wrap up here today. Before you add another tactic this week, ask yourself this: what is the strategy that this supports? If you can't answer that clearly, do not implement that, because every tactic just consumes your energy. Every initiative, consumes more attention. Every change is going to impact your team in some way. And if those tactics don't align with a defined direction, you're just burning really, expensive, fuel. So let me leave you with this. Yes, this industry is volatile. We all hear it. We all see it. The rising costs, the labor shifts, the change in guest behaviors. Tactics will always evolve, but strategy should anchor you. If you are constantly changing what you are doing, but never clarifying, why you're doing it, you are not leading. You are, again, just reacting. Remember, busy is not being strategic. Movement is not momentum. And revenue, that is not security. Strategy determines where you compete. Strategy protects your people and your processes and your profit. Strategy creates scalability. Strategy builds a legacy. So thank you for listening to Hospitality Reinvented on this episode. Until next time, stay bold, stay strategic, and let's keep reinventing hospitality together.